Good morning, everyone. It is my pleasure to reconvene the 27th meeting of the Joint Select Committee on Human Rights, Equality, and Diversity. This public hearing is being broadcast on Parliament Channel 11, Parliament Radio 105.5 FM, and the Parliament's YouTube channel, ParlView. It is my pleasure to welcome the officials who are here with us from the Ministry of Education, the National Parent-Teacher Association, the Teaching Service Commission, the Trinidad and Tobago Unified Teachers Association, and the Associated Student Body of the University of the Southern Caribbean. My name is Nian Gatsbidoli, and I'm the chairman of this committee, and I'll now ask the other members of the committee to introduce themselves, starting on my right.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome. Esmond Ford, member of this committee.
Good morning, everyone. Rushton Parry, member.
And now we ask the officials who are here with us to introduce themselves, and we will start with the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Education.
Pleasant good morning, Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Leno Batiste Simmons. I'm the Acting Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Education.
Other members of the education team?
Pleasant good morning, Chairman and other members. I'm Natalie Robinson-Arnold, School Social Work Specialist.
Good morning to the Chairman and other members of the committee. I am Darlene Smith, Guidance Officer 2, Student Support Services Division.
Good morning. I'm Sharon Ashman-John, Deputy Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Education.
Good morning. I'm Professor Dennis Conrad, Manager, Student Support Services.
The Teaching Service Commission.
Good morning, Honorable Chairman. I am Dr. Fazal Ali, Chairman of the Teaching Service Commission.
Good morning, everyone. I am Joanne Joseph Hannes, a member of the Teaching Service Commission.
Good morning. I'm Anushka Ramsaran, Senior State Counsel, Service Commissions Department.
Thank you. Officials from the Trinidad and Tobago Unified Teachers Association.
Good morning to the Chairman and good morning, everyone. I am Fitzroy Daniel, General Secretary of TUTA.
Thank you. Officials from the National Parent Teachers Association.
Good morning to the Chairman and other members of the committee. I am Rafina Ali Budu Singh, President of the National Parent Teachers Association.
Thank you. And the representative of the University of the Southern Caribbean.
Good morning, Chairman and other members of the committee. I am Sean Wilson, a Student Worker Coordinator of the Associated Student Body, a representative from the University of the Southern Caribbean.
Thank you. And I understand there's one more member of the team from the Ministry of Education.
Good morning, Chair and members. Naima Hussain, Director of School Supervision.
Thank you so much. And thank you all for being here with us. Today's public hearing constitutes the second part of our two-pronged inquiry into sexual harassment. That is, sexual harassment in the education sector with specific focus on students. Over the past 2 months, this committee inquired into sexual harassment in the workplace, generally between adults. Today, we examine sexual harassment in the education sector, focusing on students. This raises distinct issues of children victims at the primary and secondary levels and their exposure to sexual harassment by teachers or, commonly, as literature suggests, by other children. The specter of sexual grooming as a possible precursor to sexual harassment looms large, and this involves the building of emotional trust by older children with younger ones, which opens the door to sexual harassment. The issue of sexual bullying, often undistinguished within the wider bullying context, and its non-identification as sexual harassment must also be considered. Within the tertiary level, the incidences of sexual harassment may resemble more closely those in the workplace insofar as both victim and perpetrator are likely adults. However, the teacher-student angle requires further discussion. In this regard, our inquiry objectives today are: 1, to understand the prevalence of sexual harassment within the education sector and educational institutions, and 2, to examine and make recommendations on A, the current policy to guide the treatment of sexual harassment in educational institutions, and B, the level of awareness of students and staff of the complaints mechanisms that are open to them, principally 1, their rights, and 2, the duties of educational providers regarding these guidelines. I'd like to acknowledge at this time written submissions which were received from 9 entities: the Ministry of Education, the National Parent-Teacher Association, the Teaching Service Commission, the University of the Southern Caribbean, the University of Trinidad and Tobago, the Trinidad and Tobago Unified Teachers Association, the Children's Authority of Trinidad and Tobago, the Equal Opportunity Commission, and the Judiciary of Trinidad and Tobago. Let me mention at this time that the University of the West Indies indicated that they did respond through the Ministry of Education's submission, and so that would have been picked up in the submission there. So we thank them also for their response based on our asking. Viewers and listeners who wish to submit questions during today's public hearing can send questions to the committee that are related, of course, to the topic today via email at parl101@ttparliament.org, parl101@ttparliament.org, and on Facebook at ttparliament, and also at Twitter at ttparliament. I'd like now to invite brief opening remarks from the entities who are present with us. We will start with the Ministry of Education, then the Teaching Service Commission, then the Trinidad and Tobago Unified Teachers Association, the National Parent-Teacher Association, and the Associated Student Body of the University of the Southern Caribbean. So let's begin. Ministry of Education.
Thank you, Chair, and good day once again to members of the Joint Select Committee. Sexual harassment falls under the umbrella of sexual abuse. The Ministry of Education has an obligation to ensure that care and protection is available to all our students. Therefore, there is a great deal of trust and responsibility placed within our schools to guarantee safe and productive teaching and learning environments. The issue of teacher-student sexual misconduct raises concerns not only for parents, but also for the education system. The Ministry of Education believes that it is essential for victims to be protected, offered appropriate support, and afforded every opportunity to complete their education. The Ministry is aware of several instances where educators have abused their positions of trust and have sexually molested students. In addition, the impact of teacher or student sexual harassment has the potential to leave a number of negative emotional, psychological, educational, and development effects on its victims. Therefore, it is equally important that we provide support and protection for all students and staff who are or were adversely impacted. Further, through the divisions of curriculum planning and development and our student support services, the Ministry continually seeks to provide support and foster mutual respect among students. One of our main objectives is to keep abreast of current trends and to design initiatives to eradicate child exploitation. In this regard, the Ministry will increase its role of educating staff, students, and parents through the conduct of preventative educational sessions aimed at fostering healthy and respectful relationships, exemplifying and modeling good behavior, understanding the difference between sexual consent and non-consent, gender stereotypes and stereotyping, discrimination and defining the gender roles, developing and modeling positive body image and self-esteem, identifying what is prejudiced behavior, addressing the issue of learned culture surrounding the whole issue of sexual harassment. With these few words, I will pause and allow the committee to take the lead in this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Teaching Service Commission.
Good Good morning, members. Honorable Chairman, we are very happy to hear that the focus today is on the teacher-student interaction, because it raises a particular difficulty. The 1966 Education Act and the regulations adopted by the Teaching Service Commission, which are really public service regulations, are very suitable for dealing with instances where you have acts of misconduct between one civil servant and another civil servant. Let us say, for example, the Ministry of Works. But in the education domain, we now have a teacher who is a servant of the state interacting with a third party, a child, and this child, the regulations really has no power or authority over them. So we cannot compel that person to come before a tribunal. What the Commission is faced with is that in many instances, the matters fail because the child is unwilling to relive that experience in a tribunal. The mothers usually would not want the child to come forward. And we also suffer from poor investigations, poor investigation reports, and government has now reinstituted the investigations unit by cabinet minute and note, and we are happy to see that. But the situation in which children find themselves in schools with teachers is of great concern to the Teaching Service Commission, and if we are permitted, we would highlight some of those things that are of concern to us here today. Thank you.
Thank you so much. The Trinidad and Tobago Unified Teachers Association.
Again, good morning to everyone. Tutor appreciates the invitation to be part of the inquiry into the issue of sexual harassment, especially in the education sector. The association knows at times it is difficult or challenging to discuss the topic of sexual harassment, especially in the school. What we as an association has done in the past is try as much as possible to provide information to our teachers with regard to the law, the regulation that impacts on sexual harassment in the workplace. So that will alleviate the concerns or allay the fear of parents with regard to their children being in the school, because we know that teachers have that role to play with regard to the protection of children in the school. We are also aware of some of the effects and the impact of sexual harassment and what it can do to a victim. So as such, as I said before, as much as possible, we try to alleviate those concerns or those fears, and we'll continue to work with teachers and all the stakeholders to ensure that our society and our children more so is protected in our system. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And we now have the representative of the National Parent Teacher Association.
Madam Chairman, in this our 21st century environment, sexual harassment in our schools at all levels is a growing concern. It may start as a, oh sorry, I always forget, yes. I'll start again. Madam Chairman, in this our 21st century environment, sexual harassment in our schools at all levels is a growing concern. It may start as a little inappropriate touch in the primary school, and if left alone, may develop into a more serious misconduct at higher levels. Moreover, students encounter sexual harassment at home and other places in the community. Sexual harassment can be verbal comments about one's body, spreading sexual rumors, accusations, dirty jokes, or stories, physical grabbing, rubbing, touching, visual display of naked pictures, obscene gestures, or sex-related objects. In recent times, bullying or cyberbullying are actually sex-based harassment using the cell phones or the internet, to target students. In the event that students become moral spectators, there is little hope for change. Madam Chairman, the NPTA has no hardcore evidence or data on sexual harassment in our schools. But we are privy to anecdotal reports from students and parents. When parents complain, it is not always addressed by the Ministry of Education in a timely fashion. Sometimes it may go over 1 year, and that is counterproductive, leaving the student at a disadvantage. The toilets, certain blocks, and classrooms during unsupervised classes, there are acts of misconduct of a sexual nature occur. Many times, homosexual acts are prevalent. I have heard that it is no strange sight to witness students of the same gender displaying amorous behavior even in the public school space. The occurrences present our schools as hostile environments for sexual harassment. How can sexual harassment be addressed? We cannot surrender. Educate our children and parents. The National School Code of Conduct addresses these situations, but as I mentioned before, not on a timely basis. Sexual harassment affects our children for life via teenage pregnancy, school dropout, low self-esteem, low performance, absence from school, job opportunities, family life, embarrassment, shame, poor quality of life, and even suicide. We believe sexual harassment has no place in a democracy. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And the member of the Associated Student Body of the University of the Southern Caribbean.
Madam Chairperson, education should be Madam Chairperson, education should Madam Chairperson, education should safely shape the minds and attitudes of young adults and children. Young adults who have experienced sexual harassment suffers greatly from social problems, emotional and academic strain. Sexual harassment should be eradicated from the education sector. We need to ensure a safe learning environment. The reality is, sexual harassment and sexual assault are incredibly common. They happen at home, school, colleges, universities, workplace, on the public transport, etc. Therefore, we need to focus more on problem-solving solutions to eliminate and to limit sexual harassment. Thank you.
Thank you so much to our officials for their very insightful opening comments that I think touch a lot on the issues that we are going to try exploring in our time here together. We're going to start our questioning. I want to remind all of our officials, as well as members, that we direct our questions and concerns through the chair. And we will now proceed. And I will start off the questioning, and I want to focus just a bit on the primary and secondary school level and some of the things that may be happening. So the first question I want to ask, and I'd like a response from all of the bodies represented here. I'm not sure the University of the Southern Caribbean representative may have this kind of answer, but if you want to weigh in on the question as well. And my question is sexual harassment at the primary and secondary school level really a problem that requires us to address it? Is it prevalent? Do we have a problem? And I'm asking this in the context, and the representative from the NPTA touched on what I'm asking. Do we have data to support this? Is anyone looking at this problem from a quantitative type approach? Do we have a problem? Or do we just think we have a problem? Is anyone before us here gathering information that will indicate the size of the problem we're dealing with? Or are we simply dealing with the anecdotal reports of what is going on. And when I say sexual harassment here, that at the primary and secondary level, I'm dealing with everything from the actual physical approaches to the approaches on social media, harassment via Facebook, Instagram. I'm dealing with the writing on the toilets, writing these things, this one is a whatever, that one is a whatever, all on the toilets. I'm talking about students in the upper forms or upper classes, you know, going down to lower classes and harassing younger children, and that whole issue of sexual grooming and so on. Do we have a problem? Is anyone collecting data to quantify the size of the problem or the nature of the problem that we have in our primary and secondary school system? Anyone can go first, if you feel.
Madam Chair, I'll respond. Yes, we are collecting data. We have data from the period 2014 to March 2019. And our data suggests, as regards sexual harassment of student against student, we have no such reported cases. In terms of reports of a teacher against a student, we also have no such reported cases. In terms of a student against a non-teaching member of staff, we have 2 cases, one in 2017 and one in 2018. In the case of a non-teaching member of staff against a student, we have 1 such case in 2016. The area where we may have some need for some concern would be the area of student against a teacher. For 2014, we've had 11 such cases. In 2015 and 2016, 5 each. In 2017, 7. Thankfully, for 2018, we see a decline of just 2. Thus far, for 2019, our data from January to March, we have 0 cases.
So if we were to have an aggregate from 2014, the only reports of sexual harassment have been student against teacher in the primary and secondary school system, as according to the Ministry of Education, and how many total cases would that have been since 2014?
Total would have been 30.
And let me ask one more question of the Ministry of Education, since I have you on the spot. Do you believe that this represents an accurate number of the incidences of sexual harassment? And this will really just be your belief.
In our discussions, we recognize that the Ministry of Education, over the years, we have not been, for example, some of the areas that you would have outlined, we have not been collecting such data. Because when we looked at it, I wondered, and in our discussion, it was said to me that it has to be that the child, it has to be unwanted, an unwanted approach. It has to be that there is a complaint. So that I myself queried the data. Because if you go to our schools, some of the things that you mentioned, you are seeing them there, you're seeing them on the walls, you're hearing of instances. But in terms of the complaints and in terms of the unwanted advances and the information, it seems that we have not been paying attention because of our definition. For example, we are looking at sexual grooming, and it seems that the information needs to be disseminated to our schools in terms of the understanding of what this means. Or young ladies or young men, what it is. As you said, sharing of pictures. Most people are sharing pictures without the understanding of what it is they're doing. And we are not recording it as if it is sexual harassment. So just to basically indicate that the ministry has not been collecting. What we have been collecting are complaints. Complaints that has reached to the level of the school supervisors, reached the level of the principal, and then we treat with those matters, as opposed to, as what you're saying, is looking at the environment and seeing the areas where it can happen and how can we address it to ensure it does not repeat.
I'm certainly going to come back to that point that you're making there, because I think it's a critical point. But before I do that, I want to ask if anybody else wants to weigh in on this whole issue of collection of data. I know the chairman of the Teaching Service Commission wanted to weigh in.
Yes. Good morning again, members. The permanent secretary is correct that once an instance of sexual misconduct or harassment occurs, it is reported to the Ministry of Education, and then by memo from the PS to the Commission becomes aware of the incident. On our records, we have 33 reports of sexual harassment received from the period of 2014 to March 31st, 2019. We have 21 male teachers against female students, 4 male teachers against male students, 1 female teacher against a female student, 2 female teachers against male students, 1 female teacher against a class of male and female students, 1 non-teacher against a female student, and 3 male teachers against female teachers. The Commission gathers this data, and just to give you an idea, Honorable Minister, if you are able to bear with me with what is happening. In one instance, Madam Minister, we have the touching of the private part of a male student that is at primary. We have an instance of someone offering to do certain things with a young student in primary. These are allegations that we have here. One teacher commenting to a young boy on the size. One teacher squeezing. A maxi taxi driver interacting with a child in the taxi, and the principal advising the mother not to report the matter. Male teacher touching a female, poking her in her belly and taking out her shirt and so on. We have...
Dr. Ali?
Yeah.
No, these are all extremely upsetting, I think, for anybody to hear and to understand the nature of these concerns. So it raises the question. This is data from 2014 up.
Yes, yes, Madam Minister.
What is the process
Okay.
when these things are reported and it reaches to the level of the Teaching Service Commission? Where are these teachers? What happens with them?
What happens when it first comes to the Teaching Service Commission? There's usually a recommendation for suspension of the officer, and so that takes place. At the same time, the ministry appoints an investigating officer to do a proper investigation. Once the investigating officer's report is received, it is then sent to the legal unit of the Service Commission's Department for advice. They then send a note to the Teaching Service Commission as to whether there is sufficient information to prefer a charge against the officer and to appoint a tribunal. If there isn't, there's sometimes a situation where there's not sufficient evidence and it has to go back to the investigating officer. There are sometimes occurrences where parents are not allowing the student to give the evidence, like give an initial statement. If, however, we get enough to prefer a charge, charges are drafted, and the officer, as well as the Ministry of Education, is notified that these are the charges that we are about to prefer. A tribunal is set up. The officer is notified by letter in writing of the charges against him. He's given 14 days to see whether he is admitting the charge or not. And then it goes to tribunal. Once he or she says no, it goes to tribunal stage. If the tribunal sometimes takes long, depending on how many matters it has to deal with. If the officer is then deemed to, the tribunal determines that the officer is found guilty, that information is then conveyed to the Teaching Service Commission at one of its meetings. We then have to make a decision and formally decide whether the officer is guilty. Once that has happened, then we then have to consider what penalty we're imposing on the officer. We also then have to, by regulation, invite the officer to submit representations as to what penalty we propose to impose. So it's a long process.
Right, and that's what I want to get to.
And it hasn't even finished yet. So there are many, many steps along the way.
This starts with a complaint made coming up through a principal, a school supervisor.
Yes, it starts at that level.
So if something happens with a child and a parent makes a complaint, it goes to the principal.
It should, but at the same time, it should also go to the police, which is an issue we have, that it isn't always reported to the police. It should also go to the police because this is also a criminal act.
So I'm saying this now for the benefit of those listening and looking. If there's an issue and the parent has reasonable belief that something has happened between, this is teacher, student now within the primary or secondary school, these are children, then the report really should go to the police.
Yes.
And in many cases, it goes to the principal of the school.
Right, and the principal or whichever senior officer at the school that it is reported to by the parent, the principal or school supervisor, whoever gets the first report at the school, is also obliged to report it to the police because this is a crime against a child. And it should also be, so that if the parent fails to report it, at least the school authorities have reported it to the police.
And so from the principal, it goes up the ranks.
Yes, usually an investigating officer is actually often a school supervisor.
In those cases since 2014, how many of those cases have been resolved?
Okay, yes, many of them have failed. Some have been resolved. In at least one case, there was a voluntary retirement of the officer. Once he realized he had been charged, he opted to apply for early retirement.
But okay, so we have 33 cases since 2014. How many of them have reached the final stage, whether they have been guilty or not guilty or whatever the finding of the commission? How many of them have reached that stage?
I think we have a 2% success rate in bringing these matters to completion. And in that 2%, you would find that it is the mother who has taken the matter up on her own as a criminal matter, not through the commission or the Ministry of Education. In one case, for example, a teacher was given lessons to a young girl. She kept the girl there for some time, every night for lessons. When the mother realized it was sexual grooming, the mother reported it to the police. The teacher was put into remand in police custody and then subsequently applied for bail. Honorable Minister, most of these instances are failing at the commission because the structure of the tribunal is a structure that really applies to the general government civil service.
So let me just clarify before I continue. When you say failing to come to any type of completion.
Yes.
So of the 33 then,
yes,
have any have come to completion via the tribunal method? No. So therefore, what we are saying is that the whole process of dealing with sexual harassment at the primary and secondary school level between a student-teacher, that's failing.
It is failing because
Completely.
The children will not want to come and give evidence in a tribunal setting. The parents are unwilling to let the child relive that experience. And so, for example, if the offense is, Honorable Minister, a child against a child, that goes to the children's court, where there are special facilities and rooms and counselors and other people, as Ms. Hazel Thompson, he would know. If it is a child against an adult, it will also go to the children's court, and there are special police procedures and protocols that deal with that child. But once the child is a victim and is an adult against the child, it cannot go to the children's court, and it goes to the magistrate's court. And that is a very strange environment for the child. The parents and the child do not know how to cope in that environment and to describe what is happening to them. So the parents are generally unwilling to carry that matter to the magistrate's court. I think it is a gap. This is my opinion. I think it is a gap in the way we are dealing with managing and protecting children through the children's court.
So, if I'm understanding you correctly, there are no teachers since 2014 in these reported cases who have been, whose cases have been resolved at the Teaching Service Commission level. So what's happening with the teachers who would have been so accused? At this point, where are they?
What happens is that once it fails at the commission, at the tribunal level, then we have no choice but to reinstate the teachers at the school because the disciplinary process has failed to find them guilty. So because you're presumed innocent unless proven guilty, we have no alternative but to return them to their schools. You asked for some statistics. I have a chart here that shows that during the period that we were talking about, of the 7 charges laid against teachers in secondary schools, 6 failed, and all because the virtual complainants refused to give evidence or parents refused to let their children give evidence. 1 is ongoing. Of the 2 where it involved a primary school teacher, 1 is ongoing, and the other 1 failed because the mother did not give consent for the daughter to give evidence. So, as far as these are ones that were completed at the tribunal stage, or with 2 ongoing.
And the time frame for the teacher to be on suspension from the time the accusation reaches the commission, and so from the time that happens to the time where it's considered a failure, as the child is not coming to give the evidence and so on. How long does a teacher typically spend on suspension?
Too long, often as much as 4 to 5 years, because of how the process works.
In one matter right now, Honorable Minister, the teacher has been on charge in 2014. The matter was at the court, and we are still waiting in 2019. The matter is concluded, but we are still waiting for the court transcript. We cannot proceed unless we see the court transcript, exactly what the judge or magistrate is saying. And so there's a delay in getting these transcripts back to the commission from the court system.
In that particular case, the officer was found guilty by the magistrate. There were 4 charges against him. On one of those charges, he was convicted and fined $8,000 since 2016. The structure of the regulations does not permit us to dismiss him yet until we have in our hand the court extract from the magistrate's case. And for whatever reason, we haven't, and the notes of evidence, and for whatever reason, we have not received that yet. So we need the system to work a lot more efficiently for us to be able to deal with it. And that's where the police cases are really important, because the tribunal stage takes such a long time, and we also need to improve at that level as well. If at least we have some success at the level of the police cases, that gives us enough to be able to dismiss the teachers and therefore take them out of the system.
So generally, of the cases reported, these would have failed at different levels, at the tribunal level, and the teachers would have been reinstated.
Yeah. Yes, Honorable Minister.
Some also fail at the magistrate's court level for the same reason. Nobody's giving evidence.
So it's almost safe to say then that students or parents may feel as though there's almost no recourse.
Yes, unless we improve the system. And one of the things I think would help is if the officers are charged under the Child Act, the Act number 12, of 2012, because the penalties there are much more severe. And if it is that the police charged, like if the complaints are made to the police and the offending officers are charged under that act and at least get 1 or 2 convictions, to me that would send such a strong message, because penalties there as much as $50,000 with imprisonment for like 15 years and things. I think people need to see the system working and that the penalties are not small for us to be able to improve the system.
Honorable Minister, for example, just to extend what Mrs. Hannes is saying, if the matter is reported to the police and the police would charge the person, the teacher, under the Children's Act, Section 30D, that teacher could get a fine, 15 years of imprisonment, 25 years of imprisonment, and if there is sexual contact, life imprisonment. But we at the Commission, we do not get that type of data. The police would not send that type of data to us. We do not know if this is happening, and we doubt it is happening, that people are being charged under this particular act.
I want to give a couple members of the committee a chance to weigh in, because I get the sense that they do. Mr. Ford?
Okay. In terms of gathering your information, right, Teaching Service Commission, all your data comes from the Ministry of Education alone?
Yes, Minister Ford.
Right. So to go back to the executive from the Ministry of Education, Director, Social Supervision and Management, Ms. Hussain, right, it seems that the information you supplied us with is slightly different to the data supplied by the Teaching Service Commission. Is that a true statement?
Yes, sir, we seem to differ slightly.
Okay. All right. So, because if all your data is coming from the Ministry of Education, I would think that, it would be the same, right? But so much as that information, with regards to the statement made by Ms. Hannes, teachers who resume duties, right? So the Ministry of Education, those teachers will go back to the same institution, or would they go to a different institution? Even though they are not guilty, when I say because it has been, no one has been charged. So will they go back to the same institution?
As far as I'm aware, the ministry usually does, but that would be a question for the ministry to answer.
Ministry, would they go back to the same institution?
Sometimes the teachers return to the same school, or sometimes they're transferred to different schools.
Okay, and do we have a routine check? Again, no one has been found guilty, but do we have a routine check? Because, again, an allegation would have been made. The student may be still in the same school. Do we have routine checks and balances just to any monitoring of this particular teacher?
Yes. Again, as far as I recall, no, we do not monitor. Once it is that we have the disciplinary action, and we were told by the commission that this teacher has been directed to resume duty, the teacher is then allowed to resume duty, and there is no follow-up. But we pay attention in terms of ensuring that no other, within the school system, it will be monitored to ensure that children are protected. But in terms of the ministry monitoring, directly from the ministry, no. But at the school level, the principals, they would be monitored.
And in terms of the data that you all have provided us with, I know the chairman, mentioned in terms of if we have a problem, right? I think that hasn't been clearly identified by you all. Because if we look at the data from 2014 to 2019, I think that we may be making a big issue of sexual harassment, and from the data supplied, it don't exist. How are we correct? Is that a correct statement? In that we're making a hullabaloo about sexual harassment, but the data is saying that, it does seem to be a big problem.
And just to clarify that point, because that's exactly the point, if we are only collecting complaints, is it that the anecdotal reports are much more than that? I can clearly say that if you go into a general bathroom in a secondary school at least, what litters the walls alone would suggest that there's more going on that may be not reported as an actual complaint. And how are we getting to the root of understanding how big the problem is? Is it a problem? Because if you're saying 33 or 30 complaints over the last 5 years, and if we are saying that nobody is convicted via the teaching service process, then we are almost saying that we don't really have a problem. But is that in truth and in fact what is happening at our schools? And if that is not the sense of what's happening at our schools, then it means that we have no means right now of identifying the nature of the problem, identifying how large it is, and dealing with it. Is that the reality of our situation?
Honorable Minister, I think you are absolutely correct. That is the reality of the situation. The statistics, Minister Ford, they are small, but the nature of the offenses, when you read and you understand the nature of what is happening.
The Chairman, no one has been charged to date.
No, the parents and the children are not allowing their children to go through this process through a tribunal.
So how can we change it? What do we need to do? I know you spoke about, Ms. Annie spoke about the magistrate court and the TTPS and the difference, versus the children's court. What recommendations, what suggestions can you tell this committee in order that when we go back out of this room today, issues of sexual harassment will be dealt with to ensure that the culprits, once they are guilty, once they have committed the crime, they will serve the time?
Yes, Mr. Ford. I think we have an urgent need, Honorable Minister, Mr. Ford and Gatsby Dolly, to train a body of persons as investigating officers. In this day and age, the minute something like this happens and an investigating officer is appointed, what you would find happening in other jurisdictions is that the investigating officer appointed by the Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Education, should be able to go immediately to that school and do a video of the avowal of the child, immediately. If we work closely with the police and Mount Hope Medical Sciences and the Children's Authority, we can go immediately to Mount Hope Medical Sciences, to the unit associated with the Children's Authority, and gather all the DNA evidence and other things, and have forensic questions and everything asked, and secure all that chain of evidence, so we can process and proceed with this matter. But what we need is some avenue, Mr. Ford, for a child victim to be protected during the proceedings. So if a lawyer could be appointed, for example, to that child by the state to speak on behalf of the child, so then when the attorney of the teacher is questioning that child, the child is not feeling intimidated and will have to direct the questions to the attorney. So I think I would like to, I'd like to also, you ask for a recommendation. I think together with the Ministry of Education, the Teaching Service Commission, we don't see that we are standing in the back of the boat and the hole is in the front. The Ministry and the Commission, we are in one boat. So what we could do together is do an immediate assessment of every school on how they record these instances, put things in place for monitoring when people return to the school, establish a set of protocols for preventing it. The Ministry of Education can set up a mechanism to do with the same thing in higher education institutions. We could try and collate this data and publish an annual report. And we could ask, very importantly, Minister Gatsby, is for the police to record all instances of sexual harassment and violence and misconduct in schools, specifically in the stations. So we can draw upon the data from the police stations to create the necessary statistics.
Madam Minister, through you. Mr. Ali just said that the Ministry of Education and the Teaching Service Commission are in one boat. It seems to me that boat has sunk. Because when you look at the report from the Ministry of Education, it speaks of matters pending before the courts, and yet the Service Commission, what they're saying is that no one has been charged. How can the matter be before the court when no one has been charged is really a mystery to me. So that I'd like to know some more about.
Okay, it's not that no one has been charged, it's no one has been found guilty.
No, well, the words used here this morning is no one has been charged. All right.
Right. So,
Now, I was glad to hear about maxi taxi driver, yes? For years, we've had children of all ages being impregnated by maxi taxi drivers. And I have been concerned as to whether these children traveling to and from school are getting any kind of protection. Now, what does your policy say in terms of protecting children? Is it written anywhere so that children can be assured that they are not only protected, they are protected not only in the classroom, but also traveling to and from school, that they can bring complaints and that these complaints can be attended to? What is the role of the school, the support service? I see Darlene is here. Darlene Joseph, is it? Yes, Darlene is here. And I know that a lot of work has been going on, but I want to know specifically what is the role of the student support services, and there are other people here from student support services, when a child has been subjected to sexual harassment. What is really happening? I've heard mention here that children are not willing to come forward. How can you make a child feel safe and make a child feel confident that whatever reports are brought forward will be attended to? When the child is continuing in school, what is happening with that child? I would want to hear about that. I would also like to know whether non-adversarial options are being offered. If parents are not willing to have their children come before a tribunal, they are not willing to go to court, I am sure that parents are very concerned about their children being safe. I'm sure they are very concerned about the trauma that the children will, and in fact are suffering, that trauma is being attended to. In some jurisdictions, the question of non-adversarial options, which ensures victim safety and offender accountability, are being explored with great success. I would want to refer you to the Campus Prison report, and you can get it online, a report on promoting restorative initiatives for sexual misconduct on college campuses. And that would be useful not only secondary school level, also what is happening at tertiary level. Because at every level, children and students who are not children are under attack. And they need that kind of protection. They need that kind of resolution because trauma continues for a very long time. In this society, we keep asking, what happened? You know, what's wrong with you? But really, we should be asking, what happened to this child? what happened to this child. So we can't keep going around and saying that parents not encouraging the children to report, children unwilling to report, and then it keeps going on and on and on because it's having repercussions in society, you know. With these young girls especially, who are suffering a lot, and these things going on in school for years. A woman 60 years old telling me in common entrance class, this teacher, common entrance teacher, abused children, successive generations. And the children said nothing. He took the stupid children, as she described them, in the front row, and he had a unique way of interfering with these children. And this happened over a period of years and years and years. We have to stop just saying, put up our hands in the air and say we can't do anything. We need to deal with it because these children, they become adults and they end up on the other side in the prison sometimes. So we need to do something and do it quickly.
So I think the question in this was directed to the student support services, and I think it would have centered about, Senator Hagee, the whole issue of the process. What is the role when students undergo sexual harassment, and Senator Hagee focused on the issue of the transportation to and from school, or even if a teacher is involved? Do students understand, and I think the Permanent Secretary touched on this, do students understand what sexual harassment, sexual grooming, do they understand what those things are? And are there any policies and procedures at schools which are elucidated to students so that they are very clear about what is right, what is wrong, and what their rights are with respect to how they are treated by teachers and so on? And are there clearly delineated procedures that the students are aware of so that they know where to address concerns when these arise? I think this will be.
I'd like to start it off. I'd like to stress that the Ministry of Education is committed to addressing the issues of sexual harassment, not only within the school, but to and from school, according to our National School Code of Conduct 2018. In terms of the consciousness or the awareness of students with regard to sexual harassment, through our social work services, as well as our guidance unit, we focus extensively on educating our students, sensitizing them to the issues of sexual harassment, as well as our parents, and there are a protocol in terms of disciplinary actions that range from warnings, interviews, investigations, counseling, disciplinary probation, suspension, dismissal, suspension, and overall, we take a very aggressive approach to educating our students.
Can I interrupt you to ask exactly what that approach is?
Okay, I will ask our social work specialist to continue.
We do a lot of targeted preventative work with our students, and we will look at all aspects of sexual abuse, inclusive of sexual harassment, sexual grooming, cyberbullying, so that children can have a comprehensive understanding of what they are and things that they can do to prevent and what they can do to report. We
What
also,
is that? I want to get it specifically. Children go to school every single day. What part of the school curriculum specifically on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, how is this disseminated to students?
okay, it's based on what's happening at the school as well as preventative level at primary and secondary, mostly at the primary, and we will educate children on inappropriate sexual behavior, what to look for.
The question is how often?
How often?
When?
It's hard to give a time frame, but what I can say is we do a lot during our orientation when children come in to our school. We look at the lower level in terms of preventative so that they can be more aware when they get older.
You see, and therein is the crux of the matter. How often are students exposed to this type of information? Is it once a week? Who delivers? And how often is it delivered? So that we can say students are aware and parents are aware of this.
I would say approximately once a week it is done with our guidance classroom sessions, school social work targeted intervention, and our HFLE, in our HFLE sessions.
Who
Health and
delivers
family
these
life.
sessions at schools?
Guidance officers, school social workers, and teachers in the HFLE curriculum.
How many of these teachers do you have stationed at schools? Guidance officers, because I know there's a problem in terms of the number of guidance officers, HLFE personnel. How many officers do you have, and with what assurance can you say that this is given every week for students?
Ms. Smith from our guidance unit will respond.
Madam Chair and members, good morning again. Currently, we have approximately 240 guidance officers and counselors within the system, and I can safely say, continuing from what Ms. Robinson was delivering, besides the cyberbullying and respect for self, respect for others, developmental of interpersonal skills and understanding the boundaries in relationships and good touch, bad touch, we had for 2018 in the primary schools, 11,200 children would have benefited from such sessions and 14,350 in secondary schools. We recognize that in different schools, when there's a glaring problem,
and I want to ask you for percentages coming there,
right?
Because 11,000 out of how many?
Correct.
That is the crux. You see, it's not that I am. You see, I understand that there's a shortage, and what I'm trying to get to is, do we need more? Do we need more? Because what we're doing here is looking at the circumstances with a view of recommending what is necessary. And I know that those guidance officers and so on will be doing their best. But the issue is there a shortage of guidance officers? We have 200 and something, yes. But how many schools are benefiting from it? Is there a serious shortage? What kind of shortage is there with respect to guidance officers? And even within the system, is there a need for more? Because are these students on a regular basis, every week, every day, how many times can we say our students are understanding that this is a problem that may be happening? You need to look out for this. How often could that really happen based on the numbers that we have now?
Madam Chair, one of the things, as we recognize, and I think the message that has been going out clear and loud, is that this has to do with sometimes with our society. The Ministry of Education has been trying, sometimes you put it even on the television, there have been promotions where we have the good touch, the bad touch. At specific times in the schools, we will hold these sessions, host these sessions for students. Now, the message has to be clear also in the homes. The message has to be, as you said, as they are transported to and from. If the ministry, as you're saying, the increase, now we have a unit that has over 800, about 1,000 persons, treating with these social issues on a daily basis. And I'm sure you would agree there are quite a, this is sexual harassment, this is just but one. And so if we, as we recognize, there has to be something that reinforces and support that the Ministry of Education can request of the community, the homes, in terms of ensuring that this is happening. If it is that you say, when we do a campaign, but how often are we to, most of the times we even have parent counseling sessions. We host these sessions at school for parents, teaching them about this good touch, bad touch, what is happening, how to educate your child with respect to sexual harassment and sexual abuse. To me, I'll be honest, as the Ministry of Education, we seem to be moving more, this is part of being educated, but we are moving more into treating with issues that are not addressing, educating our students. And most people say, well, these are the things happening in our schools. and we are still held accountable for performance, student performance at the end of it. So our curriculum continues to be widened, and we continue to put a lot, as you said, there should be more security. From what we heard happening in schools, we should increase more security. And some of the times I keep telling persons that the issues that are rising, that is happening with this, sometimes comes from us taking all of these additional persons, placing them in a school environment and placing them into a position of trust. The same security guards that we are asking for. A couple of years ago, we had instances where we had to address quickly. So I don't know what mechanism and what will arise from this that will help the ministry, as opposed to broadening the base in terms of entry. You keep putting more and more persons, and then most of the times we understand that as we widen, we go down to persons who have issues that nobody addressed, because we widen and we put more social workers. We didn't even pay attention to their behavior or to the issues that social workers or guidance officers are coming in that may impact negatively in our school system. So I'm hoping that some other mechanism supports us in that. We have homes, we have Ministry of Social Development, we have community development. How can they support a driver, for example, as you say, in this sexual harassment? Because, as you said, it's in the maxi, sometimes it's written, sometimes you see the words even at the back of those maxi seats. You go to KFC, it's in the washrooms also. Students are walking along the road, and they're being molested as they walk along, from taxi drivers, from persons on the side of the road. Sometimes someone brushes up on you and you turn around. Even as an adult, I wonder at times what is happening, and I'm an adult. Again, I don't know how we'll get around this, but I know we have to do something.
All right, so I want to clear up this. I know the others want to come in. I was going to clear this particular point up. So we have our guidance officers. We have the programs that would sensitize students.
Yes.
But is there a written policy? What policy would define how students deal with sexual harassment that would be meted out to them, whether it's by other students or by teachers? What policies? Do these policies exist? And I'm sure the USC representative can say there's one at USC for students would be familiar with. What obtains in primary and secondary schools with respect to students and sexual harassment? Is there a policy?
There isn't really a policy. We do a lot of the classroom guidance, psychosocial, educational sessions, so that students can benefit and understand about sexual harassment. We do that in conjunction with parent information session. So at the same time, the children are aware of and learning what are these things and the consequences and what they can do. We are teaching parents as well so that they can reinforce what is being taught to their children.
So how do students understand then the procedure?
I'm looking at my National School Code of Conduct,
Right.
which is a policy document that has been revised. It was distributed in 2009 and in 2018, and it speaks to a number of, in terms of standards of behavior. It speaks to, in the Appendix 1 that we would have supplied to you, you'd have seen where sexual harassment is one. You would have seen cyberbullying included in there. You would have seen, it's on page 41, you would have seen substance abuse. Yes. You taught inappropriate sexual behavior, which is 38. So we sought to do, and we also looked at technology. We also looked at cyberbullying, and included in there is also the issue of sexual grooming within this policy that has been approved.
So what is taught then through the guidance officers and so on would flow from that policy,
Yes.
right? And so the familiarity of students with this, is it enough? Do all students at different levels know clearly enough what their rights are with respect to this policy and how they should be treated? And do they know what steps to take if they are being sexually harassed in the school? Suppose it is their teacher. Is there a designated route by which they can make their complaint, how would they respond? How do they respond?
Thank you, PS. Madam Chair, yes, there is a system of reporting for students. For something of this nature, as sensitive as this, students would tend to go in the first instance to a member of staff that they're most comfortable with. But in general, students would report to their form teacher in the case of the secondary school. In the case of the primary school, if the alleged perpetrator is the class teacher, the student has the option of going to any other member of staff or directly to the principal. At the level of the school, we also have, at both primary and secondary, the guidance officers and the school social workers. And sometimes the children tend to confide in these officers more so than they might confide in a member of staff. So in terms of children having someone with whom they can be comfortable and report these instances to, yes. If the report goes to a member of staff other than the principal, in this case of sexual harassment, depending on how serious it is, the complaint is bumped up to the level of the principal. Most importantly is that the student must be treated as though she is telling the truth, she or he's telling the truth.
Or I was say, or he, right?
Yes. And following that, depending on the nature of it, as was alluded to earlier, a police report would be made. Following that, at the level of the school, written statements are obtained from the student. The alleged perpetrator is also made aware of the allegations. The alleged perpetrator is also asked to provide a written response. Or just one other thing, the responses from the students, the written responses, are endorsed by their parents.
Okay, so there is a procedure.
Yes,
what I'm
there
asking is, are students sufficiently aware of what they are to do? And categorically, yes.
Yes.
How are they made aware? And what makes you feel that it's sufficient?
Madam Chair, the Ministry of Education, through our guidance, universal guidance curriculum that we do deliver, we do a very concentrated deliveries during the period January to Carnival, which highlights the whole sensitivity of sexual predators, right, and the possibilities of there being targeted of various forms of abuse. We have to remember that sexual harassment falls under the umbrella of sexual abuse. And we have done tremendous outreach at all levels regarding sensitizing students about their rights and the rights of respecting themselves and anybody violating them in any way. Why I believe that there's always room for more, always room for more. But besides the first term intervention between January to Carnival, we continue to do that sensitization awareness, even in terms of human trafficking and the fact that children could be targeted at any time from all sectors within the communities while they're traveling to and from schools, and they know that they have safe havens that they can come out and to speak. And developing those assertiveness skills, problem solving, decision making, even to recognizing their own when their rights are being violated is a critical aspect of what guidance and social work do in terms of creating that awareness for them.
But why I ask sufficient is because what concerned me is in numbers. If we are saying 11,000 and 14,000 out of how many thousands, hundreds of thousands of school children do we have? How many do we have? It doesn't sound to me as if that is a representative figure, or even the majority. So my issue, and I'm going to leave it here, is not that you are not doing the best you can. My issue is it sufficient for our school population? Because if we are saying that we have a problem, which we don't know the nature of because we don't have data, and if we are saying that that problem is something we need to address, and if this is the method of the preventative method, I am not convinced that it is widespread enough, or they have enough access to it being said to them over and over. Is there anything written? Do students understand how they can get the help they need? And then coupled with that is the issue of the complaints not going anywhere. And so the frustration they would feel, which with all of this tied up would lead to the kind of underreporting. They don't know they're being, that their rights are being infringed. And even those who may know that their rights are being infringed because it is, the act is so, it's gross, right, as you would have described, even when they know that, where is the follow-through? Where is the justice? Where is this resolved? And it looks almost like a very vicious, sad circle. That's just from my point of view. MP Perry, you wanted to come.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, through you. I want to thank everybody for the submissions that they made. It was very good information. It raised a lot more questions in my mind than what we've said here so far this morning. I want to just start with Mr. Ali. In terms of, I look at the numbers. I've heard about 39 in terms from 2014 to 2018 in terms of our reports. The ministry had some similar figures, even the ones that were coming out of USC. It's less than 100, right? And the Attorney General, when we were doing the Sexual Offenders Registry Bill, he identified there were over 14,000 cases of sexual abuse in Trinidad and Tobago for minors, and minors in this case is children under the age of 18. So if I take that number, and I know all of that would not be in the school system, but you put it over the numbers of complaints that you are getting coming up in your organizations, I think the disconnect is too wide to miss that something is happening. The other issue that I have is, and this is the Ministry of Education, does the ministry regulation instruct or enforce that principals must report these instances to you? And because the numbers are so low, may it be that principals are not reporting to you and they are trying to manage the issues at the school level? Because I've had instances where parents have complained that they feel that the principals are not doing what they ought to be doing. In several cases outside of a sexual harassment. And so there appears to be a disconnect there as well. The other thing that I wanted to get a little clarity on is that you have the ministry, you have the Teaching Service Commission, and then in tutor's submission, tutor is saying that they have a whole filing system that the records are poor. So tutor, who to me has the responsibility for their membership, in your submission, page 1, paragraph 4, tutor referenced the filing system used by the organization and advised that due to the filing system employed at the organization, it is difficult to extract numbers of complaints and so on. In fact, if I can't extract the complaint, I'm not sure who are the teachers involved. So you add all of that together. Tutor's filing system that to me says that I have no management part of these teachers who are under allegations of anything. You have the low reporting, the low incidence of reporting by principals, in my view, and then you have the inability, based on regulations of the Teaching Service Commission, to dismiss officers who may have been cleared, who may have been charged, but not the ones who are cleared, but they're on payrolls. And to me, the malaise is worse than it sounds, because my committee members are asking whether we have a problem, and I feel, and I want to thank Dr. Ali for making 4 or 5 descriptions of some of the complaints, because the description alone is sufficient for me to believe that we have a serious problem in the school system. It's like air travel. Air travel is the safest mode of transport, but when one plane go down, 400 people dead. So I don't need any further convincing that we have a problem, but what I do know is that the data collection is causing a serious disconnect. And the other question that I want to pose, and anybody be free to answer it, is there are 4 organizations here: NPTA, Service Commission,
tutor and the Ministry of Education, when last did these 4 organizations sit together to discuss this particular matter? Ever? And, Madam Chair, through you, that is my queries. Thank you.
There's quite a range of questions there. But no, to my knowledge, that has never happened. And the figures you quoted, that the Attorney General quoted, his figures must be accurate. But our figures, you have to remember, our figures would be based on actual reports and the willingness and the braveness of a child to actually report what has happened to them.
Mr. Ali, if I just stop you there for 1 second, through you, Chair. The fact that there are 14,000 cases, and I assume that the AG is taking cases that have reached the magistrate's court. Let's just, for argument's sake, say 10% of that 14,000, which is 140, and 1% of that is 14.
Yeah.
These would have been cases that, let's assume it has children of school age. I am wondering why there's such a large gap. Now, if the parents are willing to come forward in the magistrate's court for these matters, why are they hesitant to come and give evidence or have the children give evidence before the tribunal? So I'm trying to understand why would that not be the case, if you could prefer an explanation.
No, I can't. But what I can tell you is we would receive instruction from the parent or a letter from the parent saying that they are not willing to bring the child or they're not willing to proceed with this at the tribunal. And therefore, if there is no evidence and the witness is unwilling to come forward, the matter will fail and the commission must operate with the rule of law. If a person has not been found guilty of an offense, the commission has a whole range of facts before it, but we have to send the officer back. There's nothing the commission could do but observe the rule of law. And so this is the predicament of the commission. And this is why, even in my opening statement, I'm asking for some method, Honorable Minister Dolly, that we can protect the child, find a way through the children's court to protect the child in such a way that the parent and the child feel safe to proceed with these matters. If the offense is persistent irregularity and unpunctuality of a teacher, the tribunal method is perfect. We have to understand in 1966, and when the Education Act was written and the regulations were drafted, the leadership of the country at that time could not envisage that someone will be texting a child to meet them for a rendezvous. And that is what is happening. And these are not moderate texts. They are very explicit. I have some of them here. What the teacher is actually asking the child to do. Teachers are asking people, the children, if their parents are home, how often they are home, where they live. They are texting images of human body parts and asking them to respond to it. This brings to us the notion of the fluidity of this thing. These are not little instances happening once a week or once a term. This is a fluid environment with the internet involved. And so some of them are involving the use of internet technologies. Some of them involve actual physical touching. Some of them involve grooming and luring of children. And so this is the nature of the environment. So, Member Paré, the figures might seem low that the commission is gathering, but we could only act on those that are reported to us by the Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Education.
And that's why I'd like the PS to just respond in terms of the issue, the principles, whether they may be under-reporting against your regulation, or do you have an assessment on that?
Yes, if it's treating with sexual harassment and or sexual abuse, teachers know it's in the law, apart from the Ministry of Education under the regulation. Teaching service commitment, remember it's part of the law, they were mandated to report, especially when a report has been made. they have mandated to. So there should be no, I don't, as you're saying, in terms of the follow-up, in terms of the information, sometimes the gathering of the information, the reporting, but these are the reports that come to me, and once it comes through the IR and a case has been made on the regulation, then I would forward what is in front of me.
Madam Chair's last question on this topic, and I want to bring Mr. Wilson from JSC to this. Now, I read the submission from your establishment, sir, and when I looked at your numbers of complaints coming forward versus the numbers that were coming from the Ministry of Education in general, I'm just looking at proportionality here, in that I feel there is a higher percentage of students or teachers, vice versa, willing to come forward with complaints in your organization, which tells me that you, in your organization, is doing something better in terms of the environment for these people to make the complaints, versus when you look at the proportionality across the Ministry of Education, which has a larger student body, a larger number of teachers. Any idea of what you are doing to encourage or that environment that causes the comfort of complaints to come forward? Can you speak to that?
Right. So first of all, let me say that right. Well, let me say, right? Now, in every institution, there will be the cases where it will not be reported, right?
Just before you continue, I just want to clear up and understand that you are representing the student body and not necessarily the school. But I guess the school's management. But I guess you can speak to the environment that exists that
Yeah.
you think
Correct.
would allow for greater communication going forward. Thank you.
Correct. Right. So in every school, that there are cases where persons will not report the incidents. However, because we have an associated student body, we mingle with every student in the school, right? So it's like they feel more comfortable coming to us. If they don't want to go to a staff member, they will come to a member from the associated student body, and they will make their query. We will do our investigation. If it's something serious, and we think that, okay, we have enough evidence to prove to staff that this is the case, then we do our investigation, look into the matter, then we go to a member of staff who deals with this problem. However, USC, we are much big on protection. For example, at the dormitories, males can't go beyond the entrance of the female dorm. Likewise, female can't go beyond the entrance of the male's dorm, and stuff like, if there is a classroom that is in an area where it is isolated from the school, what we will do, we'll make sure that the school, that class is locked once there's nobody there to supervise in that area. So at USC, there's a big role on protection for students. I guess that's the reason why some of the figures are that low.
What I'm trying to get at, you have about, your school has about 3 times the amount of complaints over the same period. And I'm not saying it in a way that there's a problem in the school with that, but it means to me that the environment to make the complaint is warmer and gentler.
Yes,
so it
correct.
encourages people to come forward. And
Correct.
that is what I was trying to get at, as to what would make that environment more comforting for the complaints to come, rather than in the government school system, which is 3 times less than what's apparently is reported from your school.
Right. So, and then again, it all boils down to the way in which we view sexual harassment, right? Because at school, most of the time in society, when we look at sexual harassment, people will look down upon the victim. At USC, if something happens, we don't look down upon that person. So it won't shun the person from coming to make a complaint. So if something actually happens, they'll be enthusiastic to come and actually say, well, XYZ is the case. How can we deal with this problem? And that's how we deal with it at USC.
Senator Ahi?
I've heard a lot about educating children, and parents. But what I haven't heard about this morning is educating the teachers. Before any sexual harassment, any act of sexual harassment is perpetrated, there is a belief system that women and girls are inferior to men and boys. And one of our obligations under the convention to which we have signed is that we must try to eradicate the belief system that feeds the actions occurring. Now, I know that Tutor cannot be just an organization that works for the betterment of conditions of children, of teachers, but will also be actively working on continuing education of teachers. So I want to know, what are you doing and what is happening in the schools insofar as changing the mindset of the male teachers or female teachers who believe that sexual harassment is okay, that they are not, because I have investigated cases of sexual harassment, and what I find common in these cases are the persons who are brought before the tribunal or before the investigating committee do not believe they've done anything wrong. They do not believe. And also, they have harassed more than one person. So we need to work on changing the mindset so that this harassment would not occur. So we're talking about prevention in other ways, but what about the perpetrators? What is happening? Please tell us.
Okay, thanks again, Madam Chair. We heard a lot of discussions about teachers and whatever, and I'm glad that at some point, we moved from teachers, because we know that in the system, there are numerous issues with regard to sexual harassment. But Tutor does not support wrongdoing, and let it be clear, Tutor at no point supports teachers interfering with students. Right? Now, I jot some points here, and I'd like to elaborate on them. One, I want to support the PS with regard to the statement she made that teachers are aware of their reporting responsibilities. Right? Teachers are aware of that. In fact, Tutors and Association, through the first Vice President, we conduct numerous workshops. And those workshops will treat with sexual harassment. We'll bring in the Children's Authority, who would do part of the workshop, the whole program, and they would address teachers with regard to legislation concerning sexual harassment in the sector. Right? What we didn't touch on is that we know that in the school system, there are a lot of issues regarding children against children. And I find that, we should at least touch on some of these issues, because every day we'll see in our WhatsApp and Facebook that you have fights across the nation. Every day you see that in the classroom, you see children fighting against children. But our concern mainly this morning, as I heard, is what happens with the teacher. And I want to make it clear that Tutor, as an association, we continue to educate and address the issues of sexual harassment against students, sorry. Now, I heard Member Parry said a little while ago, Honorable Rustan Parry said a while ago that trying to get the point that was made.
With regards to the filing system.
The filing system. Right, that is correct. The filing system. Now, our filing system, as you rightly said, our filing system is notebook where we put information in the notebook. But at this time, we are addressing that filing system. We are upgrading our database, so soon we'll be able to give information at a real-time basis. But again, I must say, we really, as an association, we are in support of keeping our teachers up to date with the legislation and regulations that govern the teaching service to ensure that the issue of teachers against or teachers having sexual harassment matters against students, we reduce the numbers. Now, another issue I want to raise here is the case of reporting. Now, we heard sometimes it falls because there is no report and whatsoever, but again, what we must be aware that sometimes some of these reports are inaccurate, and I could give you a recent case whereby a parent told another parent that your child should report X on the teacher, which was inaccurate. It was very inaccurate, and the child went, and after the child realized that they were going to get into trouble, then the child pulled back the report that they made, right? Because they realized now this was, the matter was getting serious. So what we are saying is that at times we have to have the data, as was mentioned earlier, so that we can treat with the incidents of sexual harassment. And I am kind of concerned with us sitting here and we are talking about incidents of sexual harassment and we have no data. And, at the end we talk about the matter falling through, and the matter will always fall through when, it's anecdotal. If it is accurate, tutor will support that, and tutor at all times will support, teachers being brought over the coals for incidents of sexual harassment. And as I said earlier, we support the treatment with sexual harassment, and we obviously run programs on a regular basis to treat with our teachers to bring them up to speed with the legislation regarding sexual harassment, not only with students, but in the workplace.
Sorry.
I just want to make an intervention. May I just indicate the purpose of this committee being here is to look at this issue and to highlight the fact that we need things like data, we need to understand the magnitude of the problem, and we need to know what's going on. That's why we are here. So the concern of sitting here discussing this about data, this is not an attack against teachers. This is an attack against this issue and trying to understand the system and why it is not working. So it's not a matter of, because if it's a complaint with two children, it's a different thing. So we are dealing really with this whole issue and what is needed to be able to assist, because everybody is clear that spurious accusations can be made. But the point is, even if it is spurious and even if it is not, the system, and we are seeing that very clearly, is not able to differentiate that in any reasonable manner. And it's not fair to the student, it's not fair to the teacher. So this is not an attack against teachers. I want to just intervene to make that very clear. We are dealing with the issue, and if the system worked better, it would be in the teachers' favor, as a matter of fact, if these things can be resolved. You have teachers on suspension for years. That is not anything that anybody is. So this is certainly not, this is dealing with sexual harassment in the education sector. And so that's why we are bringing up these issues, and certainly the issue of data and so on, we agree with. I just want to ask Senator He to make her intervention.
Well, I've heard the response from Mr. Daniel, but I am not satisfied at the end of the day that there's been any training whatsoever of teachers organized by your tutor in respect of the convention, the international convention, CEDAW, and Oberem do Para, which is the Inter-American Convention on the Prevention, Punishment, and Eradication of Violence Against Women. Because before we go, you must recognize that sexual harassment is on the continuum of violence against women and girls. It's at the lower end, yes, but it is there, and they need to be sensitized. There will be program Center for Gender Studies. I'm showing you we will have some summer program. Perhaps some members of tutor executive can go and avail themselves of it, and then let it go on to the various schools, because you need to change, and then even at the infant level, start there. When the UE laboratory preschool started, the education was boys and girls to teach them equality. So both boys and girls taught to make sandwiches. This is no woman work and man work and all that sort of thing. We have to change the mindset, otherwise the society will just keep going as it is. To understand no discrimination against women.
I take that and noted.
Please.
Dr. Ali, I think I see his hand.
Sorry. In the original configuration, I noticed that the Minister of Local Government would have been present. Yes.
He's a member of the committee.
Yes. And I was happy to see that, because what happens in the United Kingdom is that they have found a solution using local government. And in Trinidad, we have 7 education districts and Tobago. And what we could consider, Ms. Ahi, I see her enthusiasm and I like it, is a multi-agency protocol per education district. A multi-agency protocol per education district. Now I am getting this when I look at the protocols laid out by the Children's Court for children. So for example, we have a protocol for the arrest of a child. We don't have a protocol to protect that child when it is a female teacher who is having sex with a male student in the 6th form. There's no protocol for that. Charging of a child, granting of bail, taking a child before the court. So from the time I started here, I have been pleading and asking to protect the child victim from my very first sentence, that when these children are so affected, we must find an environment to make it safe for them to stay and come forward and make their statements. Now, what we could do, Honorable Minister Gatsby-Dolly, is that, for example, in a multi-agency protocol, let us say in the Victoria Education District, we should have a group of people developing that protocol that will involve the TTPS, the Children's Authority, the Probation Services Division, the legal aid, many parents will need legal aid, the Solicitor General's Department, Office of the DPP, the Ministry of Education, the Trinidad and Tobago Prison Service, Judiciary of Trinidad and Tobago, and these units can come together to create a protocol. So when an incident of this nature happens in a school in Victoria, local government can take the lead in harnessing and managing how the agencies of the state can come to the assistance of the child. Minister Ahi, what do you think of that?
Aware that in the Solicitor General's office, there is an office called Children's Attorney. There's a
I
position.
do.
You liaising with
They
them.
assign an attorney to speak for the child.
Yes, because the officers, they are very enthusiastic.
But you see, I see your enthusiasm in your eyes and in your speech. But how many children and their parents ask for this attorney to be appointed to them?
And I think at this point, I want to draw the attention to one of our objectives, which is Objective 2B, to examine and make recommendations on the level of awareness of students and staff on the complaints mechanisms that are open to them. And this is why I was asking from the Ministry of Education side. But it's clear that it's not just a Ministry of Education problem. There are other things. Though they have a role, there are other ways that students and parents need to be educated, to be aware of what their rights are, what is available to them in dealing with these particular issues. Because what is, I guess, the most obvious option to them has not, over the years, turned out to have the type of results that they would want to have for various reasons. All right? I think it's clear that the system we have today would not have anticipated the problems we have today, and therefore we are lagging behind. I don't know that we have touched everything we want to touch, but I think that now is the appropriate time to ask the bodies with us to make closing comments on what our discussion would have touched on and centered around. And so I want to ask you in the same order to make your closing comments. Ministry of Education, followed by Teaching Service Commission, We have tutor, we have NPTA, and then the representative from the USC.
Good afternoon, Chair. It has been enlightening. The Ministry of Education, it was good being at least to be able to participate this morning. We listened, and one of the things we wanted, with respect to data, one of the issues was the definition of what was sexual harassment as opposed to actual sexual abuse, the data that is collected. So our data for that will be much different to what we have in our understanding of sexual harassment. We have learned that the environment, that we need to not only provide human, in terms of social workers and guidance, but you also need to relook at the environment, to look at our washrooms, look at our classrooms. We need to, on a regular basis, ensure that our students are educated from the early childhood care and education straight up to our tertiary level. Well, again, we recognize that it cannot be just the Ministry of Education approach. It must be an approach that encompasses a lot of agencies, institutions, ministries in terms of responding to this matter of sexual harassment. And in the issue of data, we would once again impress upon our teachers and our principals to ensure that all data is collected, whether it leads, as we said, to a charge, whether the matter has been dropped. We need to know what is happening in our schools. And we also, as we said, we need to support our students when they come forward. They're brave enough to come forward. We need to provide some sort of mechanism that allows them to be protected throughout the entire process, so that we indeed may, in fact, see if charges are going to be preferred against the perpetrator. But we also recognize that in some instances, the allegation may not bear fruit and teachers, the negative impact on our schools when teachers are, in fact, it is alleged an act has been perpetrated and they did not even know about it, or were even in the room or in the area whenever the charge has been made. So we are hoping that we educate our children well enough that they will understand what is sexual harassment and that they are actually protected. Thank you very much.
The Teaching Service Commission would like to give its commitment, if this committee so decides, to work with a given time frame to come up with a multi-agency protocol using the basis of the organization of the state in terms of local government. We are beseeching the committee to look at the way the Children's Court is operating and to see if any adjustment can be made to that court. I love the smile on your face, Ms. Ahi. That is, you brought joy to my heart. That court cannot continue to work where the child is the perpetrator of the offense. The court must allow the child who is the victim to come there and be protected, and it cannot do that at this time. It is a major shift. And what I would like to ask also is, for example, Ms. Ahi, I know you are a Caribbean jurist. The evidence bill, amendment bill, if you read the evidence amendment bill, when you're guarding evidence, it's about eyewitness and ID parades and so on. It's almost a piece of legislation in the criminal jurisdiction. But inside of there's provision for the protection of a witness, designed for the protection of persons who might be given critical evidence. Can we use this to protect a child? I don't know. And there are other provisions. So I think this idea that I'm putting forward to the committee, that a multi-agency protocol be developed to bring to the assistance and the service of this child these different bodies and parts of the government apparatus, will make parents and children feel much more comfortable to come forward. Because these are not good things I have on record here. I cannot even say them. I am ashamed. And that example I just gave of a female teacher having sex with a sixth form student is real. I cannot say these things. Pardon me, mister?
See, Dr. Ali could not draw us back into discussion.
Prepare the protocol and send it.
We invite the NPTA. This is next on the list. Go ahead.
Well, we are dealing with sexual harassment, but I thought, a question would have been posed to me representing parents and children here today. So I get a chance to say something. What I want to say is that we spoke about sexual harassment, and sexual harassment stems out of disrespect, little acts of disrespect in the school. And a core value of all schools is respect, having respect in the school environment. And the blame goes on, well, the parents not training the child, and we will take our blame. But we always say, if the home is not doing what they're supposed to do with the children, you have next the school. The school has a responsibility. And I will tell you, it is almost chronic in almost all of our schools, primary and secondary, the use of obscene language. And no one is addressing it. Right? The school is not addressing it. The community is not addressing it. I have to say the churches too, because it's everybody's business. And this is where sexual harassment will start. Because when these things are not stopped, when the children are not taught, well, you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that, the graffiti on the wall and so on, it will grow into bigger ones. So I am saying that sometimes children will be troubled in school, molested in school. With a simple obscene language, they go to the teacher, and the teacher dismisses it. How does that child feel? No one listens to the children. You know why? Because they feel it's children. They're not telling the truth. And we say that parents give up. You know why parents give up? Parents give up because they feel they have nowhere to go to. They go to the district office. If it is not solved in the school, they go to the district office. And nothing is done because who will deal with the problem? The supervisors. It go a little further, they will call the principal of the school. You have the parent, the principal of the school, the supervisors. No one represents the parent or the child there. So they feel they lose out. They go to the Ministry of Education. As I said, sometimes it takes a long time. And while all that is taking place, the child is the one who is losing out. And Trinidad and Tobago are a very small place. Something happens in one school, all the schools know. So the child is the one who feels the brunt of it. I am recommending, or I should say the NPT is recommending, that when cases like these, or I should say parental complaints go to the office, there should be a stakeholder committee sitting and listening so that the parent will feel and the child that they are being dealt with equity. And I have a concern, and we have raised it all over, is our secondary school students being dismissed early and those children are on the streets unsupervised. I have mentioned that many times, and I'm seeing it still happening. In primary school, it's different. I guess because of the age of the children. And for some reason, they feel that secondary school could over any time and the children on the streets. And our children are on the streets. They are idle. They are vulnerable. Okay? And the same protocol on dismissing a primary school early should adhere to the secondary school too, because we are dealing with children. Okay? So another thing I would like to see is if we could have a robust transport system for our children. You know, we talk about United States and United Kingdom and so on, but in United States, children don't take a taxi and go to school. They don't take a taxi. They are protected. Okay? And we hear many horror stories about the maxi taxis and the taxi drivers and so on. Okay? And we have all our students, not all our students are equal. They are outside on the streets. Just some time ago, a 14-year-old girl was on the street and she was begging. And what is she begging for? Uniform to go to school. I don't know, I questioned that you're begging for uniform to go to school. And I told her, well, let me take you to the school. I'll go with you to the school, and we'll discuss with the principal how you can get a uniform and so on. And that was the end of the conversation, right? So we have to protect our children. We have to believe in our children, and we have to inculcate in our children good values, morals, and ethics from small. And I'm not taking away the parents' responsibility about that also. But we must realize that our children are little people. They have feelings, just like big people, right? And I think that is missing. And we are creating some of our children, we are making them into monsters when we deal with them like that. Okay?
Thank you so much.
I want to see equity for all of our children.
All right.
Okay? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Tutor?
Yeah, thanks. I will be very brief. In closing, Tutor will continue to support all stakeholders with regard to the development of policies involving sexual harassment. We give a commitment to look at methods to educate our teachers with the issue of sexual harassment and violence against women. And we'll also give a commitment to improve our data system so that we can provide real-time information to the relevant authorities so that we could treat with the issue in a timely manner, and also to develop policies going forward. And we always remain committed in any way we can assist with the support of the education system. So again, we want to thank the committee for inviting the association to the meeting of on sexual harassment in the education system.
Thank you so much. And Mr. Wilson from USC.
All right, so today we looked at sexual harassment and things that can be done to eliminate sexual harassment. What I just want to say is that one case is way too much, and we need to pay more attention to our school environment. Our school environment should be student-friendly, and if the school environment is student-friendly, then whatever cases may arise upon site, the student will come and will make a complaint, whether it's big or small, because one case is still way too many. I like to recommend that each school have a handbook that specifically states the different types of sexual harassment and how it can be done. And this book can be used in assemblies or in classrooms or wherever, so students would have a better understanding of what sexual harassment is. And it's also important for us too to look into the way in which we deal with sexual harassment. Some of the methods are way too long. Probably the process is a bit shorter. You might get more out of it. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. I think I want to really thank all of our contributors here. I think everybody made very sterling contributions. And I want to indicate on my own behalf, as well as I'm sure the committee members agree, that we didn't get adequate time, to go through some of the issues, because there was very serious issues of child sexual harassment that we would have liked to explore as well. But I just want to summarize some of the main things that we would have spoken about. And one of the main things, and I'm going to kind of tie it to our objectives, and one of the main things is that I think we can all agree that the problem of sexual harassment at our schools, whether it's primary, secondary, or tertiary, is at this point unquantified. I don't think we know the magnitude of the problem, although we all agree, I would imagine, that there is a problem. And as we indicated, that even in the case where there is one or two teachers accused, it may be a series of children over years that may have undergone the problem. And so really the issue of how big this problem is, I think bears further investigation and data analysis and collection of data and design of instruments to be able to collect the kind of data we would need to understand how big our problem is with respect to sexual harassment. I think also that we would have discussed that the system in place at this point to deal with issues of that nature is certainly not adequate, and we can go all out to say that the system is a complete failure at this point to deal with those types of issues specifically. I think what has been indicated so far is that the likelihood of any teacher who is accused of sexual harassment passing through the tribunal process and actually being resolved, whether it is guilty or not guilty, the likelihood of a resolution is very close to 0%. And so there is urgent need at this point to look at the revision of how that type of complaint is dealt with, specifically student complaining against teacher. And that may lead very seriously to the underreporting, because the feeling of failure from the time you start, because nobody can be pointed to say, well, this person would have been successfully gone through the system, whether it's guilty or not guilty. And it's also frustration for teachers, because it means that they may be going through this system. They may be innocent as well, but they get the same problem of being on suspension, having a stigma maybe attached to them and so on. And it certainly is something that we would need to look at, because at the end of the day, the children are exposed. Whether it's, what is happening, the children are exposed. We looked and we spoke about the fact that in terms of collecting the kind of data for sexual harassment, we may have to look at, because it's in the school system, it's looked at in the wider context of sexual abuse. And therefore, to be able to disaggregate harassment as against grooming, we need to look at the definitions of what we have before us to be able to collect data that deals with specific issues. We spoke about the fact that the investigation of these matters can bear a lot of revision as part of the wider process. And we spoke about the use of modern technology to capture the data which is most pressing, which would be the testimony of the students. And for different reasons, they would not feel comfortable coming forward. So we need to look at that very seriously, because the safety and protection of the child victims, that is the paramount thing. And so the system now is not necessarily friendly when we look at that in regard to children, and so that needs to be carefully examined. We also spoke about the fact that, and this is coming straight from the Teaching Service Commission, which seems to have a lot of recommendations, and I'm just bunching them into recommendations for how we can deal with this issue. Because I think we can all agree now that, I don't know, I certainly don't feel comfortable as a mother of 3 children. I don't feel comfortable. I'm sure many of us understand that there's no comfort to be had in what exists at this point. And so there are a lot of different recommendations coming out from the Ministry of Education. Teaching Service Commission also indicated a lot. The NPTA would have suggested some recommendations. The university student representative would have made recommendations as well for a handbook and so on. All of this really falls into, and I'll use the term coming from Teaching Service Commission, the multi-agency protocol with respect to dealing with sexual harassment, and then I dare say sexual abuse as we go even wider into the school environment, and particular concern about the primary and secondary, because one of the things that may have contributed to the tertiary institution having more complaints is that you have adults at that point, and they may be more aware. But when we're dealing with primary and secondary school, we are coming from a level of infants, 5-year-old children. What are they to do if they are faced with that situation? And do they know? And suppose it is the teacher, their teacher, then what is the situation there? So I think it is definitely clear that we do need some discussion, and I think Member Pare brought it into clear focus when he asked, have these agencies come together, even the ones sitting in front of us, to discuss this problem at all? And it's never been done. And so I want to make that very clear, that there's an urgent and clear need for discussion between Teaching Service Commission, tutor, the Ministry of Education, NPTA. Further to that, the TTPS, the Ministry of Attorney General and Legal Affairs, the Children's Authority, the Judiciary. There's a number of stakeholders that need to come together to look at this issue and look at how we are treating or not treating with this issue, and therefore we can look at how we can determine the magnitude of the problem and update our procedures and processes so that our children at the end of the day feel safe, they feel as though they have some measure of protection, and they know what they have. Because one of the things we were asking about here is the level of knowledge. Are they aware? And I am not satisfied, despite the best efforts of all of us, that they are aware enough. The representative spoke about a handbook, and clear procedures and so. I think we can all agree that revision is urgent and necessary to protect our children within the school system from the specter of sexual harassment, and even wider than that, the whole specter of what that graduates into many times, which is full-blown sexual abuse. So I want to thank you for coming here. I can't say that I'm left with a warm feeling in my heart. I feel even more concerned, but I feel that we have raised the issue, a very important one, a critical one in our country, and I do look forward to our recommendations in the report being able to influence in some way the start of the process that would improve this situation for our children, who are the future of our country. Thank you so much, and I'd like to declare the meeting now adjourned.